The learnings of the Nishmas Ahuva by Yaakov Masechus Temurah Perek Gimel Mishnah Beis. This perek is discussing the halachas of a carbon that gives birth. What's the status of that child? And the Temurah, which we know is Kadosh from Perek Aleph Mishnah Aleph. What's the status of that Temurah? So Mishnah Aleph discussed a carbon shlamim. It was machlikas whether a vlad shlamim is yikrav shlamim or lo yikrav shlamim. And there was a third shita that said that by vlad everyone holds it's lo yikrav. And the Temurah for sure you bring as a shlamim. By a Temurah obviously there's no Temurah as Temurah because we said in Temurah he said Temurah. Mishnah Beis discusses taida. Vlad taida utmurasa vivladan ad seif kol olam. Both by the vlad and by the Temurah harei elu ketaida vlad she'in tunan lechem. So just like a shlamim where it was yikrav shlamim, by a taida also it is yikrav as a taida. The only difference is that over here, a taida normally comes with 40 lechem. Over here, there's exeris hakasev that you don't bring the lechem. The Gemara learns it out from a pasuk. The Mishnah now goes to oila. So now by oila, it's important to note that an oila is a zachar. A shlamim could be a zachar or an nekeva, but a oila has to be dafka a zachar. So there's no such thing as a vlad oila. But the Mishnah says that there's such a thing as a Temurah Sa'ila, and then we could discuss what's the halacha of the Vlad Temurah Sa'ila. So Temurah Sa'ila, Vlad Temurah, Vlad Vladan, Vlad Vladan, Ad Seif Ha'olam, Harei Elu Ka'ila, V'tunin Hefshe V'nituach V'chalo L'Ishim. It has the exact halachas like a carbon oila. And we'll get back to a question on this in a second. Mishnah Gimel, Hamafresh Nekeva La'oila, the Yolda Zachar. So we already discussed that there's no such thing, but this guy went ahead and he did it, even though you're not supposed to do it. And now this carbon that he said is an Oila, which is an Akeva, so it kind of doesn't make sense, gives birth to a Zachar. Yira Adshi Yistav V'yamachar V'yavi B'damav Oila. This child has a halacha that you have to wait until it gets a mum, then you could sell it, and with the money that you get, you would bring a carbon Oila. Rabbi Lazar over here argues and says, "Hu atzma yikrav oila." You don't have to sell it. The vlad itself, which is a zachar, could be brought as a carbon oila. So the Gemara asks, how come over here the Rabbanan say that you can't bring it as an oila? It has to be sold. And in the Reisha, by vlad Temurah oila, which is Mishnah Beis, and the Mishnah Beis, we said that everyone says that you could bring it as a oila. So the Gemara says two terutzim, either Enochanami, the Rabbanan would argue over there, and the Mishnah over there was Rabbi Eliezer Shita that says, Rabbi Eliezer Shita that says Hu atzma yikrav oila, or in the last Mishnah was talking about a vlad Temurah oila, and a Temurah oila could be brought as an oila, as opposed to over here where we're talking about the vlad of an oila nekeva can't be brought as an oila itself. It would be yira ad sheyistav. So male the vlad also is yira ad sheyistav. So that's how the Gemara answers the stira Rabbanan ad Rabbanan from the last Mishnah. Soon we're going to ask a kasha from Rabbi Lazar from what he says at the end of this Mishnah. But first the Mishnah says Hamafresh nekeva la'asham. Now again this is impossible because the asham has to be a zachar. So tira ad sheyistav v'timacher v'yavi v'dameh asham. The halacha is that you have to wait until it gets a mum, you sell it, and with the money, you could go ahead and bring your carbon asham. And karv asham, and if you had already brought your carbon asham, so then yiplu damel and nedava, you could also use that money to be brought as a nedava, oilas nedava. Reb Shimon says, timacher shaloi b'mum. You don't need to wait until it gets a mum, because the asham, which is in a keva, is the same thing as a mum. Ein lecha mum gadol mizeh. In fact, the Gemara asks, what's the pshat in the Tanakama? Why would you need to wait for it to get a mum? First Gemara on this, Testament Beis says, "V'lama li tistayev." Why do you need to wait until it gets a mum? Timacher kivin lechaz yalam bilsa hainu mum. Since it's a nekeva and an asham can't be a nekeva, so that itself is the mum. So the Gemara says, because migu denachtalei kedushas damim, since kedushas damim is chal on it, so nachtalei nami kedushas haguf. So kedushas haguf will also be chal on it. And on that, Reb Shimon argues and says, the Gemara says a little bit later, that kol midi l'lechazi legufa, since it's not chaza for it itself to be brought as a carbon, lo nachtalei kedushas haguf, it can't have on it kedushas haguf. So now Rashi asks, what's a very obvious kasha, how come Reb Shimon argues on this case of asham, which is a nekeva, and it can't be a nekeva, and says that you don't have to wait until it gets a mum. But in the beginning of the Mishnah, when you had an oila, which was a nekeva, an oila had to be a zachar, over there he says that you do have to wait till it gets a mum. It doesn't say Reb Shimon argues over there. So Rashi answers, because an asham, which is a nekeva, you never find. That's impossible. Mashenki in oila, you would find as a nekeva, where? By an oila's ha'oif, because we said already earlier in the previous parak, ein tamas v'zachras be'oif, that an oif, even if it's a mum, even if it's a nekeva, it could be brought as a carbon oila's ha'oif, and therefore the musig of oila by nekeva applies, even though by behemoth it doesn't. So over there, he's not going to hold that it's so simple that you could just sell it without a mum. You have to wait until it gets a mum, and then you could sell it as an oila, and sell it and use the money towards an oila. So now the Gemara moves on to the next carbon, Lagabe Temurah and Vlad. Temurah's asham, Vlad Temurasa, Vladan, Vladan, ad saif ha'olam. What's the halacha by in asham? By its Temurah and its Vlad. Yiru ad sheyistavu v'yimachru v'yiplu b'demeyem l'nedava. So as opposed to everything we learned until now, by shlamim, by toida, la'oila, we said that you are able to bring itself as a carbon. Over here, the Tanakama says that it has to be yira ad sheyistav. And over here, Rashi is mitzayin a Gemara earlier on Yechesam and Aleph. It says a klal. This is an important klal, that kol shebechatas mesa ba'ashim raya. There were 5 chatois mesas we learned earlier. One of them was Vlad and Temurah, and over there the carbon would be mace. By an asham, if you have a Vlad or a Temurah's asham, it's raya, and that's halacha Moshe Misinai. Kol shebechatas mesa ba'asham tira. That's the shita of the Tanakama. Eliezer Omer Yamusu, he holds no, it's just like a chatas is misa. Over here also is misa. And the third shita, Rebbe Lazar, which sounds the same as the Tanakama, is yavi b'demeim oilis. With the money you buy oilis. So Tanakama says, wait till it gets a mum, sell it, and with the money bring it linadava. And he uses the words yavi b'demeim oilis. And Mishnah Dala, we're going to explain what the nafkamina is between the Chachamim and Rebbe Lazar. But first, the Mishnah ends off Asham shemesu bailav v'shekipru bailav, which is another 2 of the chatois hameses. Again, you would have the same machlekes. According to Tanakama, it's yirat sheyistav yimarchu yipul dam l'nadava. Rebbe Eliezer Omer Yamos, and Rebbe Lazar Omer Yavi Bedama of Oila. So the first and third shita hold Kol Shebechatas Mesa is Tira, and Rebbe Eliezer argues and says that no, an Asham is just like a Chatas, that it's Mechuyev Misa.